Tables are another way to organize information on your web page, different than lists. Tables create columns and rows of information that can display larger sets of data in a more organized fashion. The standard layout for a table includes 3 or 4 different HTML tags, starting with the main tag, which is table. This creates a block where all the other elements will be placed to create one single table of information on your web page. Each row of data is going to be inside of another pair of opening and closing elements, and that is the TR, or table row set. And you can see VS Code has indented this a little bit to indicate that it's a subset of table. So everything put inside of here is going to be one single row of information across, in this case, the very first row of information on our table. Inside this first row, typically we'll have a set of elements called table headers, and we're going to have a certain number based on how many columns of data that we're going to have in our table. So let's say we're going to have 3 columns of data. So we'll do the TH here, and then whatever information I put in between the opening and closing is going to be the text that appears in that very top cell. In this case, this is going to be the very top left cell. So I'm just going to call this call1 header, and I'm going to create 2 more. So inside this first row, there will be 3 headers, and then I go on to make the next row of data, and this would typically be the first row of actual data that is going to map to these 3 columns. So I will create another set, and I will use the TD indicating that this is a data row, and I can get 3 of these and call this data 1, data 2, and data 3. And fix the typo. Okay, so I now have a table with a row, which is the heading, and data, which is in the very first row. Now notice this is a nice thing that VS Code does, gives you a little visual clue. You notice that these did not get indented the way these did, and that's because I forgot to put in a table row around it. So if I start another row here, VS Code's going to put the ending there, but I need it down here. Okay, and there we go. And then if I had remembered to do that, these would have been indented for me as I was typing them. So we have a table here, and inside that table we have a table row and another table row. So 2 rows of data horizontally across the page. And this table row has, for the first row, table headings with the text call1 heading, call2 heading, call3 heading, or header. And then the second row, which is the actual data, uses the TD, or table data, elements, and we have the actual information that will be displayed as data 1, data 2, and data 3. So let's save. And so we can see the table has been rendered here for us. Now I left some styling here that I did not want to have yet. Wanted to show you that. So we can see that without any styling applied, the default behavior of the browser is to put the text up and not draw any lines. So it is making a table, and each of these parts is in a separate cell, but we can't visually see the cell. We can see the alignment a little bit. Everything appears to be left aligned here. And the main difference between a TH and a TD is that the default style is a little bit different. Typically the heading would be bold to make it stand out as the label for all of the elements in this column of data and such. And to further show that, I will, let's, oh, not sure why I did that. 5 and 6. There, cleaned itself up. So I can continue adding rows, TRs, with data inside. One last thing, and this is a big gotcha with tables, is that the number of headings you have needs to be the same inside each row. I have 3 headers here, so I need to have 3 data elements here, 3 data elements here. If I leave one out, let's say here I only put 2, then the browser is going to make a decision for me, and browsers may show this a little bit different, but what I have here is just a blank. Now this looks fine. It's just blank data, and that's what the browser decided to do. So let's go back here and put the styling back in so we can actually see a little bit more about what the browser's doing. So I'm creating a style here that will affect table elements, table headings, and table data. And the property is border, and you can see it has 3 values to it, separated by a space. Of course, the colon in between, semicolon at the end. So this is the width of the line it's going to draw. This is whether the draw is, or the line rather, is solid, dash, dotted. There's some other choices, and then of course the color of the border that it's going to draw. So we saw this a little bit earlier. And we can see that I'm missing a piece of data here, and the browser has decided just to leave it blank. We can also see here that the border element for the TD, and that's these entries here, draws a box around each element. But we also are applying this border to the table directly, which is what's drawing this bigger outer square. So we get this kind of double square effect. So we could change that in a rather interesting way. If we were to remove table and say just draw borders around just the inside pieces, then we can see that the big outer line has disappeared. And we can play around that in other ways to cause it to draw lines that maybe look a little bit more like the way we want it to look. However, there's a shortcut way to do that, to make the borders all be on top of each other, essentially, to collapse them together. So if I apply that here, that is border collapse. And I can set that property. I've got a few options here, but collapse is the one I want. And that's just going to tell the browser collapsing the inner and outer borders that you're making for the different pieces and parts into one line. So it's still drawing a big outer line on the outside, or a border, and then borders around each of the header elements here because we have header included, and the data elements here because we have data, but then it's drawing them on top of each other so we don't see them. So it looks a little bit nicer. While we're here looking at styles, let's play around a little bit with how we can position and arrange the data inside the table. So just here in styles, I'm going to create a property just for tables by itself. And if you recall that whatever I put inside the table here will apply to all tables. And then things here inside this group of properties will be applied on top of that. So I'm going to create a special style here for table that will be applied, as well as the border ones that we have here. And so I'm going to change the width of the table, and I'm going to do this in percentage, so I'm going to make it 100%. Okay, and when I save that, we can see that the table now spans the entire width of the browser. And if I change the browser's width, the table is going to move or react to that as well. Okay, so that's pretty big. I think maybe 80% might be a little better. Okay, so we have made it cover 80%. In addition, I can add another property here, let's say just for the headers. So the TH, and we have an height option. So if I want to put a little bit of room in here, so this isn't so crowded, I can use height. And in this case, instead of percentage, which is related to the body area or the main area of the browser, I'm going to do this in pixels. So like we talk about with images, pixels are just the number of dots in the body area that the element, in this case the header, is going to occupy. So let's make it say 45 pixels, 45 px. When I save that, we can see that the column got much taller because of the height, and looks like the default for the browser here is to center both horizontally and vertically. Again, that may look different in different browsers. So I'm okay with the way that it's looking here. If I was writing this for multiple browsers, I would want to view it in those browsers and see if maybe I need to override defaults to something to make it look the same in each. I like the header centered, but I think I want the data centered as well. So I can apply or add a TD group here, and I can set the text align to centered. That's right up on the top. That's the one that I want. And so when I save that, that's going to force the data over as well. Now this looks pretty nice, but all the data that I have in these cells are all the exact same length. Just to see how this is going to look, and I guess I should maybe fix this here. Right, that was data 3. Let me make some of them a little bit longer, of different widths. And we can see that how centered reacts to something really long like this. So we can see that it's out to the left a little bit at the beginning and further out to the right than the column above it or the cell above it. So we can see that it is truly being centered all by itself, and depending on how you want this to look, that may be fine, or maybe centered isn't the way you want to go here. We can also give a little breathing room to these cells. They are pretty close to the lines. So we can, back here in styles and in our TD area, we can add some padding. This again is in pixels. And we'll start small, let's say 5 pixels. Now I'm not sure what the default is. So when I save here, if we don't see any changes, that probably means that the default is 5 pixels. It got a little bigger, so I would guess that the default is about 3 pixels. So I just added a couple more pixels, and to see it, can make it larger and see how it gets even larger. Now, our padding here for the TD is 15, and the height of the THs here is still being affected by this height property that's being applied to this. What's interesting is it looks to be about the same, which is interesting. I could just include padding here, particularly if I was trying to get, so that looks pretty much the same, but say I was trying to get a certain look and feel of this, then I'd want to use padding on both of them so I can play around with the settings and make it look more like I want. So I want this a little bit tighter, and I'll leave that as is. Okay, so I'm happier with that. So the fact that the distance above and below the text in a header and a data cell The fact that they're being driven by the same property means that I can now just play with the numbers and not have to guess. Before, when we had the height of 45 pixels, that was calculated by the browser to do something that worked pretty much the same as a padding of 15. But to play around with the two of those to change the look and feel of this was going to be too hard trying to guess what those do. So by changing them both to padding, now it's an even playing field here where I can just experiment with the numbers and see what happens. And the last thing I want to show you here with tables is a little trick to combine either rows or columns together for kind of specialty tables where you want to change the formatting a little bit like you might do in a spreadsheet. So what I'm going to do first is just paste in a different table that's already set up for this. So I'm going to paste this in, save it so we can see what it looks like. And so got my headings across the top and a couple of rows of data here. What I want to do is, instead of having first name and last name, I want one large cell here, one large heading that just says name that covers both of these columns here, all the first names and all the last names. So I can do this by adding a call span element heading, and I can combine these. So the first thing I'm going to do here is clean this up a little bit, and I'm going to get rid of first here. Now I've got a problem. I said earlier that we need to have the same number of headings or data elements in each TR, and you can see we don't. I have 2 here, and then I have 3 here and 3 here, and this is definitely not going to look like the way I want, but you can see that the browser made a decision, and it just decided that every second column falls under the age heading, and then there's just nothing here. Well, that's not what I want to do. What I want to do is move the age over here back where it belongs, and I want name to span both of these without the line. So in the name, which is the one that I want to expand, I'm going to add a property, call span, and then I put in the number of columns that I want it to span. In this case, I want it to span 2. I want it to span the first name column and the last name column. So let's check out the math here. So I have this spanning 2, and I have one more heading, 3. So I technically have 3 elements here and then 3 data elements. So the math works out there, and when I save, we get the effect I was looking for, which is this now spans both of them. I, of course, had to change it to a more general name because now this is covering both the first and last name, and then age moved back over to where we want it. And we can do this same thing to rows as well. So if I drop in a different table here, let's save this. So this is a less standard format for tables, but it is certainly doable, and that is that the headers run down the side, typically the first column, I should say, and the data is then in each row following that. So we've got the first name here, and there's Steve. The next piece of data associated with Steve is Smith, and the age of 29. So this switches things around. That is doable. If you look here in the HTML, it's a little strange. Definitely different here, that you can see in the first row, that's this first row here, I've got a heading and then 2 data elements. So I've got the heading, and then I have the 2 first names I want to show. The next one, of course, is last name with the 2 last names, and the final one here is the age heading with the 2 numbers. So this is not as standard, and I think probably one of the reasons is it's a little harder to add information to this. So if we get a third person to add to this, I've got to go add a TD here, then add one here, and add one here. And to make that point a little more obvious, back to this more standard table, to add another person, all I have to do is copy, paste this and then change their data in one spot. So it just becomes a little harder to maintain something like this. Um, but it is certainly doable if you follow this pattern of the header and then the data associated with that header. Now, I go over that so that I can show you how to do this table, but also so that we can look at the effect of the call span, which is similar to the row span, although it's going to be applied to this table in this format. So I want to do the same thing here. I want these two headers to be combined into one and just make it generically name. So I'm going to do the same thing here, which is I'm going to add, in this case, a row span, and I'll make that 2 again because I'm doing the same kind of thing. And now I've got this down here. Now if we save it, a little confusing, that header got pushed out into Steve's data, and then Steve's other data got pushed over, and anyway, it's just a problem here. So technically the math is not checking out here because I have in this row, that ends up being this row down here, I have 2, 3, I now have 4 elements. So all I need to do to clean this up, to make it look the way I want, is just get rid of this. I have to know now, it's a little harder to calculate the number here, but one of these 2 rows that this thing is going to span is down here, and we just have to trust, or if we save, we can see that the browser shows us that. So it's not as easy to verify you've got the same data, but you can certainly visualize it. So now we have name spanning the first 2 headings, and we just don't have a heading down here. And then we're back to a heading and then the 2 data elements here in this 3rd row, and that all looks just fine. And one more last thing that you can use here in styling is classes. So let's say we wanted to make a particular cell or a select set of cells here different color or apply some kind of different style. I can use classes, as we've learned previously. The dot in front, give it a name, whatever name I would like, and we'll just say, let's pick a blue violet. That sounds good. Okay, so I've just defined something here that I could apply anywhere. I could apply it to the body or any of the elements on the page. I'm going to apply it, I guess I'll apply it right here where the cursor is. So to this 29 right here. And when I apply that and save it, it ended up not taking effect because I did not save after I added this. So the browser currently does not know about this. As soon as I save it, then we see the change. And so we can use classes just like we have on other elements to apply them to cells. We could also take this and apply it up here to the entire row. Oops. And I think I've got to clean this up here. And so in this case, then we're going to apply that special to everything in this row. And when I save it, we can see all those things now have that styling. And whatever I have inside these curly braces is what's going to be applied to any place that this class has been applied.